Thank you so much for having me. And I mean, first of all, I think I do need to say that it is without a question, Venezuela is right now facing a coup attempt, and it is being led by the US government. And we know this because immediately after we have the first results of the election, what we saw was the United States government immediately backing the opposition, backing these claims that they won the election, giving this announcement that they were going to recognize the opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez as the winner. So all of these things happen so quickly, so fast, and we've seen this movie before. We know this script for years, from years behind. So we know that this is a very meticulous plan, a meticulous strategy to create the conditions for a coup in Venezuela. So that is what is going on right now. So now to explain what happened during the elections and the electoral results. Well, first of all, on Sunday, on July 28, when we held the elections, the process was completely peaceful, completely normal. I was going to electoral centers all across Caracas. I spoke with voters. I spoke with members from the polling stations. And I know that the process was very normal, that people had confidence that their vote was going to be legitimate. And what we saw that day at midnight on Sunday is that the National Electoral President, Elvis Amoroso, gave the first results of the election, and he proclaimed Maduro as the winner. Minutes before that, like almost immediately after that, the Venezuelan opposition, led by Maria Corina Machado, said that they weren't going to accept these results and that they actually said that they had won, based entirely on these electoral records that they collected on their own, but that nobody can actually verify to be true. And you have to remember that the opposition said, even weeks before the election happened, even months before the election happened, that they were never going to recognize the results. So we knew from the beginning that they were never going to accept anything that Venezuela's National Electoral Council said on the day of the election. So of course, we were expecting that we're going to reject these electoral results, and we were expecting that we're going to immediately call for violence, and that's what they did. They rejected the electoral results. They immediately called for violent protests in the streets. We have seen really terrible fascist actions happening in Venezuela all these days. In fact, two Chavista popular organizers in Aragua and Bolivar states were murdered, were assassinated these past few days by these fascist opposition groups. So we have seen this very planified violence in the streets. And of course, the opposition has now created this new narrative that they have these electoral records, and they publish 3 different websites where people can allegedly consult these electoral records that they collected. The problem is that just by doing a superficial analysis of these electoral records that they publish, you can tell that there are so many inconsistencies that you can already know that most of these evidence it was forged. It is fraudulent in many ways. Not to mention the fact that President Nicolas Maduro went to the Supreme Court of Venezuela demanding that the Supreme Court intervenes in this process and certifies and verifies and reviews the electoral results in order to be completely sure that these results are legitimate. And the Venezuelan opposition, even though they claim they have overwhelming evidence that Edmundo Gonzalez won, they decided not to show up to the Supreme Court. So all of this tells you that there is not a drop of innocence in these actions that they are carrying right now. And just to clarify, it is true that the National Electoral Council of Venezuela hasn't published the detailed results voting center by voting center in Venezuela. They haven't done that, and they have claimed that there's been a cyber attack going on against the electoral transmission, against the electoral system. So they haven't been able to publish the entire results. Nonetheless, they have given 2 electoral reports where they confirm that Maduro won. And not only that, but these electoral results actually give Edmundo Gonzalez quite an amount of votes. So you can tell that the results are quite true, they really represent the reality of Venezuela, that there is a sort of polarized context with a lot of people who in recent years have begun voting for the opposition. So we know that these electoral results actually truly reflect the reality on the ground in Venezuela, which is completely different to the one the opposition is claiming, in which they say that Edmundo won with more than 70% of the votes. And only by looking at the Chavista marches, the Chavista rallies, all these things that have been happening in Venezuela, you can tell that that is an absolutely absurd representation of reality in the country. From a personal point of view, I just want to add that these past 7-8 years have been, in many ways, very traumatizing for the Venezuelan people, because we've come from this internal war that the fascist right wing imposed against us, in which they were hiding food, they were doing things to destabilize the Venezuelan Bolivar, the Venezuelan national monetary. Then we have US sanctions, and then we saw these enormous crises happening in the country. We saw family members, friends from our childhood go away, migrate to other countries. For example, there was in 2021, I traveled to Ecuador to visit my family, half thinking that I might stay there, half thinking that I'm going to come back. A year later, I decided to come back, and I cannot tell you the absolute fear that I had, thinking that I'm going back to a war zone. I'm going back to a place where the reality can change from one day to the other one. Like today I might be okay, the next one we might not have food, the economy might destabilize even more. Maybe the Bolivar is going to be even less powerful than it was yesterday. So you have to live in this sort of like constant fear that everything's going to change, that you have to be prepared for a war-like scenario any other day. So that is a constant fear that we can live in for many years now. So when you present yourself in these elections, when you go to elections, you're not just voting for two political projects, just like Zoe was talking about. You're voting taking into consideration all these elements that might happen to you. For example, you vote for President Maduro and you know that US sanctions are going to continue oppressing the economy. You know that they might get worse. You know that there might be threats of military intervention. You know that right-wing governments in the region are going to once again try to destabilize the country. So you know all these things. You're not going to vote just for a political project. You're voting thinking about the entire aggression that you're going to face because of that the sovereign decision that you're making as a Venezuelan, as a voter. And the same thing for people who vote for the opposition. When they go to vote for the opposition, they're not voting for Edmundo González or for Maria Corina Machado. They're voting for them because they think that it might, in some way, improve their life, generate any kind of change in Venezuela, that being getting rid of US sanctions, getting rid of all this aggression that we are always facing. So it's not as simple as just voting for a political project. Venezuela is always facing the immense dilemma of what to do, how to face a future, how to create a future where we can all live in peace. Because at the end of the day, working class Venezuela, whether they are Chavista or opposition, they want the same thing. They just want a peaceful country. They just want a normal economy. They just want a normal country that nobody else is trying to interfere with. Nobody else is trying to create damages, to create destabilizations, just so they can put a US puppet as a president. So that's basically what Venezuelans in the majority, no matter what political project they support, want, just peace and a normal economy. You have to remember that Venezuela has an immense amount of oil. So we are actually capable of being a country that can develop very well, that can have a really good life conditions. And we saw it in the first years of the Venezuelan, the Bolivarian Revolution with Hugo Chavez. We saw how many people learned how to read. Many people went to school for the first time. They graduated. I mean, I have family members, my mother including, who was able to go to school for the first time because of the Bolivarian Revolution. So we know that this great country can happen. We know that it can happen with the ideas of the Bolivarian Revolution. We know that it can happen with this political project that we have now. But we also know that it's going to always be impeded. It's going to always be blocked by these foreign powers that do not want a socialist alternative to try in Venezuela, because we know that that is a threat for the entire left in not only Latin America, but the entire world. As you know, the Bolivarian Revolution, Hugo Chavez and President Nicolas Maduro, they support Palestine, they support the Palestine people's fight for liberation. And That is something that a government like Venezuela, a country like Venezuela that is rich in oil resources, supporting social and American cause like Palestine, it is an absolute threat for U.S. imperialism. Maria Corina Machado is one of the biggest allies of fascist governments in the world, including the Israel government. So as you can see, the Venezuela, these elections are not just about who wins the election. It is about completely changing the path of a country who is right now on the path of sovereignty, and what they want for us is to be on the path of being a U.S. client state.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.